Hi everybody, Dan Litwin here again, and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This week, talking about in more detail the media release that I brought up in my conversation, my Priceless Advice conversation with David Horwitz recently, and he also had some Tuesday tips on marketing that I'll link in this video as well. But a little more detail on a media release, because this is a really important piece of legal paperwork to include in your volunteer agreement or event release of liability or volunteer contract, whatever kind of legal forms you have for volunteers. It's good to have this as either a few sentences can be sufficient, or even a few paragraphs, depending on how much and if your legal team for your agency gets involved, or how you're going to use film, photography, recordings, TikTok, social media, featuring volunteers or members of the public, depending on how you're going to use that content, that material that you're taking of folks, depends on the intricacy and the specifics of the language. This also depends on what state or country you're in. Privacy laws or IP or copyright or media release laws might be a little bit different. And just to say that I am not an attorney, so ideally pass this by your legal team with your agency. And if you don't want to do that, or you don't have a legal team, there's a lot of sites that have already fleshed out for nominal fees, kind of doing legal templates and forms for you. And I'll put some links to some of those services that I've used before. None of them are paying me to say this. I've just found them highly useful when I haven't had much budget with agencies or we haven't had a legal department. So, all that being said, a media release form or a consent to filming release is a legally binding document that grants authorization for a party to produce, reproduce, or reuse, edit videos, take pictures, print, and record sound of an individual. And individuals under the age of 18 will need their parent or legal guardian to sign this release form. The media release form may be signed before or immediately after the impacted party, the filmed person, has participated in an event, which is dependent, again, on local state laws. It's important to give volunteers an option to not be filmed or photographed. They don't have to give you an excuse, but an easy way that I've found to let people opt out of being featured in your website or social media is to just say, yes, I agree to this media release. And again, whether that language is a few sentences or a few paragraphs, and I'll get into what are the basics to include in that. If you've never written one before, you don't have one. But the easiest thing to do, and especially at a really large public event where you might not just get volunteers or staff that have agreed to media release, but if you're catching members of the public, is to have like a bright green, like a neon green bunch of ribbon or strips of fabric that someone can just like tie onto their arm in a really obvious way, that when you're processing those pictures or that video and deciding which items to use, which content to use, that the editor of video, for example, can either blur people's faces or just not use shots that those people are in where they've opted out. That's kind of the easiest way. But you should have an opt-out option because of growing concerns about privacy being violated, not just going against laws, but the possibility of breaking trust with volunteers or new volunteers, like, oh, why are you going to film me? People have all sorts of personal reasons, sometimes directly related to their own safety, to not be photographed or filmed, or they just may not want to have that happen, and we need to respect that. But when you do have a media release, and if volunteers, and I find that most people do agree to this when you explain very clearly and you're very transparent on how this will be used. We're going to use this on social media. We are going to use this in a training video with other volunteers. We're going to post this only internally on the volunteer portal for folks to enjoy from our volunteer appreciation party. But make it really clear why you're creating this content or filming or taking pictures. So what to include? Each media release can be different. Again, they can vary in length, but most states do not have tight or specific requirements that must be met. And if you don't want it to be burdensome to the volunteer, just like keep it as short and simple as possible. Otherwise, if there's too much legalese or too many paragraphs of this, that gets kind of overwhelming or intimidating to a lot of people. But it should, at the minimum, include their printed name, their address, their email and phone number, their signature that they agree to be filmed, names of the parties waiving rights for listed use, so a parent if the whole family or their kids that are minors are involved, names of the parties, your agency or organization receiving rights to the listed media, the pictures or recorded video of the volunteers, and acknowledgement of age. They don't have to put their birth date. Again, this can be very sensitive information for folks to give out. It's usually a little bit of a red flag, again, with hacks and privacy violations and identity theft and things for people to list their birthday, but just that they're over 18 or they're under 18 can be a checkbox. And then identification and consent of that legal guardian required if the party waiving their rights or agreeing to release media is a minor. So the types of content a media release form covers. The media release form may declare or provide options on how the content will be utilized, the longevity of the form, or provide specification if the form is for a particular activity and therefore a one-time use only. So there's blanket and there's limited media release. Blanket is usually the kind that you include in a volunteer agreement for a recurring volunteer or someone who's doing a one-time drop-in thing, but you want to use promotional pictures from that on your social media and website. All content types should be outlined in the form, so you can say, film, video, print. Those are kind of the most common. Social media, you can get into detail. And examples of potential scenarios may also be listed. Common information found in media release forms are the following. The party granting consent waives the right to compensation or royalties, particularly important for volunteers. The party granting consent, the person being filmed or photographed, waives the right to disapprove or approve of the final content creation. And you can change that up. You can say you do get final proof, is what it's called, final approval for something to be used, or they can say, no, whatever pictures you take, it's okay. And again, there just has to be some trust that you're not going to show someone in a particularly unflattering or humiliating way. The party granting consent acknowledges other contracts will not be breached by participating in the current agreement. The acknowledgement that the party granting consent, the person being filmed, release any applicable business, entity, or school from liability in all claims or nonprofit organization in the case we're talking about. List the class of media release, which may be defined, again, as limited or blanket. And also list the rights of the party receiving consent, which is your agency, which may produce, reproduce, edit, print, trade, or share content, videos or moving photographs, illustrations, advertising, images, likeness, sound, and statements or comments as desired. And the media release form is subject to, again, any laws in your area. And sometimes notarization is required, but usually not. Individuals may consult legal counsel, highly recommend that, to ensure the validity and scope of the form. So in 10 minutes or less, that's how media release forms are and work and what they should encompass at the bare minimum. However simple or complex you make the legal language depends a lot on the situation. But if you're just doing pictures of volunteers during their normal duties, this can be included in their normal forms that they're filling out to work with your agency. And again, absolutely crucial for everyone's trust and safety to give people the option with a little maybe bright neon green ribbon or fabric tie to opt out of being in any of this content. So I'll put some examples and some free templates in the video description below. Check out these other Tuesday tips and videos that kind of dig into similar topics as well, including utilizing student volunteers in film or media college tracks to help you record trainings or other important materials. So I hope you found these Tuesday tips helpful, and we'll see you next time with more. Have a great rest of the week. Take care.